I started this YouTube channel looking at the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 6K Pro. And although we've had some ups and downs, I have always been a huge fan of the company and the cameras. Today I'll be giving a mini review of the Cinema camera 6K full frame and comparing it to my 6K Pro and discussing why you might want to upgrade or why you might want to stick to what you've got. Since the release of the Pocket 6K Pro, Sony have released about 10 cameras, while Blackmagic basically gave us slightly revised versions of their older cameras in different flavors. The 6K G2, the 12K OLPF, the Ursa Broadcast G2. But we have all been patiently waiting for a proper, new Blackmagic camera, a true follow-up to their 6K and Ursa line. And then an announcement. Grant Petty was going to do one of his infamous live streams. Was this finally it? Finally the moment we'd all been waiting for? And there it was, the Blackmagic Cinema camera 6K full frame. What?
So you can see how nice that looks. So it's a big sensor. I'll turn the camera off.
The Cinema camera 6K looked just like another Cinema camera 6K Pro. Where was the redesigned box-shaped body? What was the real point of difference? Why can't Blackmagic ever truly listen to their fan base? They managed to keep the one thing everybody hated while changing the things that most people weren't concerned about. And now we come to the Cinema camera 6K, Blackmagic's most confusing camera to date. Their first full-frame camera, a new, exciting innovation that they just haphazardly stuck in the body of their old 6K. The same body that all Blackmagic fans have been begging for an update and redesign of. Because here's the thing, we all love the image the 6K can produce. The color science, the B-raw, nobody can fault the image. What we needed was to fit that image in a better body, more suitable for cinema productions. It's not rocket science. Yes, the LCD screen is great, but as soon as you use this camera in anything other than a studio environment, things get very awkward. And as per too often, Blackmagic's upgrades have focused on the things they think we want, rather than simply listening to what the fans have asked for. And the backlash and hate on this camera has been palpable. Nobody's giving Blackmagic a pass for this oversight this time. In years gone by, there was a sense of, hey, they'll fix these things on the next one. Like all Blackmagic fans, I was both disappointed and angry. Yeah, full frame is great, but this outdated, chunky DSLR style body is no longer acceptable, especially when you look at what some of Blackmagic's competitors are offering. I cursed Grant Petty, I rage quit Blackmagic fandom, I complained bitterly to my filmmaker friends. And then I went and pre-ordered one. You see, at the end of the day, what I care most about is image quality. And while this absolutely should have been put in a different body, the Cinema camera 6K has some key changes and innovations that actually make it very appealing. So let's talk about why I chose to hate purchase this camera in spite of my initial misgivings, and why you might want to. Firstly, this is full frame, and I love the full frame look, and one issue with the old 6K Pocket cameras is their rather aggressive 1.6 times crop factor, which is a larger crop than a lot of the other super 35mm cameras on the market. Having had the opportunity to film with the Cinema 6K now, I can safely say it does not disappoint. It does seem to give everything a slightly nicer 3D pop that I could never quite get with the original 6Ks. It just feels a little more immersive and closer to the Ursa 12K. I can't really say the image is better than the 6K Pro, but I can say there's definitely a little extra special sauce in there that gives it a point of difference and feels new and exciting and cinematic. Yeah, I said it. And let's be clear, This is really the only camera at a reasonable price point that does full frame 6K internal RAW at the time of recording. Zcam's full frame cameras don't do that. Both the Red Komodo and Komodo X are super 35mm sensors at double or triple the price. The Sony FX3 and FX6 don't do that. Kinefinity's full frame Mavo cameras don't do internal RAW and also cost much more. So if you love the full frame look and want a 6K resolution RAW workflow, this is actually the only option, and there is nothing even remotely close at this price point. That's not something to underestimate. Here are some examples of the full frame Cinema Camera 6K versus the Cinema Camera 6K Pro. Now, this is not an apples to apples comparison, as I could not match the lenses exactly, but I think they provide a good idea of just how much more you get at each focal length in full frame. Look how much extra screen real estate you get, and yes, you can just feel how that pulls your eye into the images. With that extra depth of field, you can film anything, and it kind of has that beautiful painterly quality which you won't quite get with the Pocket 6K Pro. The next reason I decided to buy this was the new L mount. While some people would have preferred RF or E mount, the L mount still offers most of the same benefits, the key thing being flexibility. With modifiers or adapters, you can use all your old EF mount glass, but you can also use PL mount adapters, which really sold me. PL mounts are universal when it comes to cinema lenses, and cinema glass tends to be the best glass designed specifically for cinema productions. This is something that was always a problem with the 6K Pro, as there is no easy PL mount conversion, which means there was no easy way for me to say hire a set of Cooke lenses or any type of high-end cinema glass and just put it on my Blackmagic camera. And because you can get PL adapters for both the Red Komodo and the Sony E-mount cameras, it means for the first time I can use the same lenses across my Blackmagic, Red Komodo, A7S III and A7 IV, which is something I'd been wishing for a long time. Suddenly any new lens I buy can go on any one of my cameras, and that's awesome. With the new dimensions of the full frame sensors, we also finally get true support for anamorphic lenses and the opportunity to utilize different de-squeeze options to make the most of these anamorphic lenses. I've talked about anamorphic lenses and my love for them many times before. I do believe they offer a great point of difference to regular spherical lenses. The 6K full frame finally provides the opportunity to really make the most of this anamorphic style of lens in a way that the old 6K Pro did not, and I can't wait to utilize this feature. The OLPF filter. Blackmagic have only very recently started adding this to their camera sensors. In fact, they've only done it once in their upgraded 12K OLPF, as far as I know. One of the big knocks on the image of the Blackmagic 6K cameras is that it was prone to IR pollution and moire and aliasing issues under certain conditions. So it is great to see them taking steps to finally eliminate these issues once and for all and get that beautiful image quality consistently under all different conditions. And finally, we can't ignore the price. This is the same cost as the Pocket 6K Pro, but you're getting full frame 6K. You are most definitely getting the best image in the sub 5K category. And as per usual, all the other alternatives are much more expensive. Blackmagic always comes through in price to performance. So those to me were the big advantages of the new full frame 6K. Let's talk about the cons. And let's start with the most obvious, the form factor. No upgrades here, no more ergonomic body, just the same impractical, ugly ass, oversized DSLR blob we've had to put up with for the last 3 years. No innovations or adjustments, which I think most of us would have happily paid more for, and all the same problems carried over from the 6K Pro. Terrible battery life included, another huge disappointment there. Apart from the sensor and adding CF Express cards as a recording format, which is a welcome upgrade to CFast cards, it's the same old story. This shape, this thing, is what makes us embarrassed to show up to professional sets with. As I've stated, you can't really call a cinema camera until you create cinema housing to match the name. It's also missing the 6K Pro's internal ND filters, which I freely admit were great additions. But with the release of the Nisi C5 matte box and the Tilta Mirage, we have some really great options to put variable NDs on the front of our lenses. And variable NDs can actually be a lot more flexible than the hard stop versions you have internally with the 6K Pro. You also could purchase something like the Poco Modifiers, an adapter which adds internal NDs behind your lenses. Ultimately, there are some good workarounds to the removal of the NDs, and the additional lens options you get with L-mount, for me, easily make this a worthwhile trade. You do also lose some slow motion options, as shooting an open gate full frame will only give you 36 frames per second max, and 48 frames per second in 17:9 modes on the full frame 6K. You can get 60 frames per second with the 6K Pro and the handy 128 frames per second in the 2.5K crop mode, which can get some great results with enough light. I know it's trendy to have crazy slow motion options, but for me, shooting at half speed is fine for 95% of projects I do. So I only need 48 frames per second. If you're a slow motion addict, then likely neither camera is going to be for you. But it would certainly have been nice to see Blackmagic try and compete with what other cameras are currently doing in this area. Autofocus and image stabilization still don't really exist with this camera, although you can use gyro stabilization in post-production to provide a similar form of stabilization. But let's be real, autofocus is something that you can't expect from cinema cameras, especially if you use cinema lenses. But some updates to provide IBIS would have been welcome here. While Blackmagic can hide behind cinema camera logic, ultimately they do have to remain current with their competitors, and so with no updates in these departments, it is starting to feel like they are falling behind. Filmmakers now want a great image with these luxuries. They want the best of both worlds, and the prospect of just getting a great image is no longer going to cut it. But the 6K Pro didn't have these features either, so you're not missing out on anything if you switch. However, one of the downgrades in switching to the cinema camera 6K full frame has to be in its rolling shutter, which is worse than the Blackmagic's 6K Pro's rolling shutter, which was in itself pretty bad and I talked about previously. If you do heavy action in your scenes, or quick pans and sudden camera movements, or even intense handheld run and gun work, then this is going to make the jello effect on this camera glaringly obvious and definitely not worth buying. Of all the issues I've highlighted, rolling shutter and the camera's form factor are definitely its biggest weaknesses. We should also mention that this camera loses the ability for ProRes shooting options that came with the former 6K cameras. This is actually a big deal because shooting ProRes for clients who don't want a raw workflow is a great option. Downsampling the 6K sensor to ProRes HD was also a fantastic feature. And while B-RAW is better and runs smoothly on most computers, ProRes is definitely missed. So what are you really getting in the new Cinema Camera 6K that would make the upgrade worthwhile? For me, it's all about the new, beautiful full frame image and the new world of lensing options that the L-mount and its adapters can open up to you. Those things alone made me take the plunge, and so far I am absolutely loving the image coming out of this camera. If those things aren't important to you, then a 6K Pro is going to give you a similar image with a Super 35 sensor and the added bonus of ND filters with more slow motion frame rate options plus ProRes shooting formats. For those who are new to Blackmagic cameras but want to see the stunning image quality for themselves, I do think this is the entry-level camera to buy. If you already have a Pocket 6K and don't care about full frame or cine lenses, then I'd say you should wait until Blackmagic finally listens to its fan base and releases a new 6K or Ursa style camera in a different, more appropriate form factor. Once they manage to combine this full frame look with a nice cinema body, the conversation around which cinema camera to buy is going to become a lot more interesting. As always, I am the Savage Filmmaker, and I'll see you when I see you in 6K full frame.